Hello, how are we all? Hope we're doing well. Welcome to the middle of the week, depending on where you are in the world. But I'm calling in from Australia. So if you are joining me live, make sure you say hello. Introduce yourself as well. Don't be shy. I just wanted to jump in this week and actually just talk about the most sustainable cities in the world. What are they doing around the world, and maybe what can we learn from them? And yes, of course, we're all individuals here on this call listening to this, but it's an opportunity for each of us, to play a role in changing the way that our family thinks, our friends think, our communities think, our businesses think. We don't always have those positions of power, and we sometimes can feel, I guess, um, you know, powerless really in this very complex, very big challenge. And I think what is important to realize is, I know from my own experience in my previous role where I had very little power to make much change. But what I still did was I kept talking about it. I kept bringing up in conversations, and I kept pushing the agenda that I knew was so important for my business. And it ended up resulting in rallying teams from around the world and securing my Australian business, or the Australian part of our business, their first renewable energy project at a large scale. And so this is the opportunity for each of us to drive this change. I'm no one special. We all have this power to make change. And so I think that I don't want to diverge too much on that pathway, but I just wanted to give you perspective that although we're talking about cities here and cities being sustainable and what are they doing, and therefore what can we learn, it is an opportunity for each of us as individuals to play a really important role in this journey. So that's really what I wanted to say. And I just wanted to first highlight the UN SDGs. I think that obviously a city being sustainable is fundamentally on this idea of the 17 sustainable goals. And so I just wanted to, bring them up on the screen here. Number 11 specifically, which is about the sustainable cities and communities. This is the one that is really fundamental to this particular topic today. But actually, in actual fact, really, all of these need to play an important role. And so you can't address everything all at once. It's really complex, and there's so many of them. Hi, Supriya. Thanks for joining. There's so many of them. So it's really ultimately about starting with probably what's the most important, or what has the highest impact in your city in this case, or in your business, or in your life, and considering how we might address that one, and then systematically building on the response that that the city might have towards their most impactful areas, or their most impactful issues, or their most material topics. Really, if we're talking ESG talk, it's what's most material to the existence of that city. And so really, if we go to the list, what are the most sustainable cities? I'm going to go from, I guess, the lowest on the list to the highest. And so this is obviously, always changing. But this is a list that I was able to come across, and Netherlands is number 10 on this list. Obviously, Netherlands is a very dense city with a lot of waterways throughout it, but it was ranked in 10th place. It's got very good water sanitation. That is a big need, given that it is highly traversed with waterways and estuaries. So that's one thing. And then, of course, many people cycle and they use public transport in Netherlands. So that's another reason they ranked highly on this list. Canada is number 9, and that's because they are actively working towards their 2030 commitments around not just net zero, but about sustainable living as well within the country, and improving social sustainability, which is something that often gets pushed to the side, and something that's not always acknowledged as well in a developed country. But there is certainly poverty even in a developed country, just obviously much less of it compared to other countries. So that's Canada, 9th on the list. Then we have Germany. So, of course, you'll see a lot of these kind of Northern European countries that are rated very highly. And it's just because it's so entrenched in their communities and the way that they live. Germany in particular has a very strong renewable energy program, but it also has a very strong recycling program. And so I know, having met a couple of Germans just recently who were traveling, and they just thought it was mind blowing that there was even plastic in the shopping centers and supermarkets, because everything over there, in terms of shopping at least, there's always a cloth bag in your with you on your person, or there's the option within the shop to have to transport your items without using any plastic. So they found that really interesting, and so did I. I mean, it's just so natural and part of their life that everybody carries these cloth bags and these reusable bottles, and probably reusable cutlery and utensils as well, or packaging as well, containers. So yeah, so obviously Germany is high up on that list, is very intrinsic in their culture. So New Zealand, my neighbours, in fact, we're in Australia, so New Zealand, our neighbours, are doing very well, ranking pretty high on this list as well. New Zealand being quite a low density in terms of population country as well, and having a lower energy demand, it's been less of a challenge for them to get to their renewable energy targets. So they've got there very, very well, and also a little bit more easily than other countries. But the thing is, the other thing that makes them quite sustainable is they have a very good public transport system. So actually, not many people, use cars. So really, per capita, there's a much lower car usage, which is really wonderful. So that plays a big role, of course, in reducing emissions. And New Zealand as well has really great amounts of land that have been preserved and looked after. So of course, it's super green, super lush, and very low pollution levels in terms of their air quality, to be specific. Denmark is next on the list in terms of rating quite highly. And again, Denmark also has a lot of waterways, and many people using bikes. So very similar to the Netherlands in terms of how they achieve their sustainable ratings. And next in line is Finland, who is continuously working on reducing their fossil fuels consumption. They have a lot of woodland areas as well, so Finland is also quite green. And in fact, 70% of their country, or thereabouts, is protected from any deforestation. So there is no disruption to their wildlife, and their wildlife is highly protected. And it's probably not surprising that the next on the list is Japan. We all know that Japan is a very tech savvy country. They're always thinking about new ways to improve their life. There is still certainly some things to consider around their shopping ethics, and the way that they consume, products, like say consumables on the street. So what I'm talking about is food products and the packaging around that. But they are very much focused on the 100% carbon emission free by 2050. So they are implementing a very strategic, very thorough recycling program across the country. And there's essentially like 10 different categories of recyclables, which is far more than I've seen here. So yeah, it's a huge step for Japan, and they're obviously rated very highly on the list as a result. And of course, they also have a lot of untouched areas that are protected by protection laws. Norway is next on the list, and the reason why Norway rates so highly as a very sustainable country is a combination of some of the things we mentioned with the other cities, which is they do have a recycling program and a carbon neutrality focus. But also, because Norway predominantly actually use hydroelectricity, and that powers most of their country, that's basically a lot to do with the fact that they have a lot of water sources as well. They are able to reduce their obviously their emissions and their energy profile substantially compared to many other countries. So they have a very low pollution profile, which is really incredible. And of course, they have such lush green surfaces that are protected and not basically degraded from overuse and farming practices and deforestation practices. So Norway rates very highly on this list. And then the top two is Switzerland and Sweden. And I'm not trying to combine the two together, but I want to get through this list to talk about a few other things. But Switzerland is number 2 on this list. And again, waste, energy, a big focus for the country. They are restoring their oceans as well, which is a really incredible action that Switzerland is taking in particular. And I know that that's a really important thing that we're starting to consider. Oh, we have been looking at very actively actually in Australia, because we've got these beautiful coral reefs. And so looking at protecting our oceans is such an important part of moving towards a more sustainable existence, a more sustainable city, more sustainable country. So Switzerland, of course, rates highly because of that. And finally, Sweden, which is top of the list as the most sustainable city. And the way that Sweden have really focused on becoming more sustainable and really holding this strong position as a very sustainable city is, one, they've got a very strong agenda. It's not a 2050 agenda, but really a 2030 agenda about creating peaceful, democratic conditions that are looking at a harmonious existence, not only with nature, but within their social systems, within their communities. And so the SDGs have really been a core part of establishing this political commitment that trickles down into their corporate environment, into their business culture, into their communities and the individuals, and the way that they essentially live and exist and coexist together. And so, of course, that changes or reduces really the impact on the environment and improves the social sustainability within the communities. And so, as I said, Sweden is really doing a lot of things to exist as a sustainable city and maintain that existence, and also thrive through this process of embedding policy that creates sort of not just strict, but also, I think, economically viable regulatory systems or a legislative system that supports economic value, but not in the way that we have always seen, not in the way that it's just a very consumerist, always pushing for GDP through very typical linear models. It's very much looking at a circular model that, supports the idea that no one is left behind. And when I say circular model, we're talking about one where there is a regenerative culture about, regenerating the environment, but also about distributing resources so that everybody, the lower socioeconomic groups as well, or the groups that are, I guess, more neglected in society, are receiving the support and the funds and the education and the training to improve their own life. So it's a whole of society approach, and it really is about creating a local thriving ecosystem where they're not having to continuously depend on external resources and supply chains that can be very much subjected to climate change and the impacts of climate change. So yes, it's a really obvious reason why Sweden is right at the top of this list. And yes, as I said, it's really up to us as individuals, as well as bigger communities and broader business culture and governments to obviously play a role. But I do think that each of us have a powerful role to play as individuals in driving this conversation and speaking up about the importance of becoming more sustainable as a community, therefore a city. So I think it's so great to share this with you. I'm so happy. I hope that you have enjoyed this live. And if you have any questions, I haven't seen any come up on LinkedIn. That's why I keep looking down. But I haven't seen any come up. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask this even later on. That's totally fine. And of course, share your thoughts as well. I hope you have an incredible rest of your week. If you have any ideas on what it is you'd like to hear next time, let me know. But I wanted to thank you all for being here today for this particular live, and I hope you have an incredible rest of your week. Take care, everybody. Bye.